Hi, it's me editing Rachel. Obviously, this is the re-upload of this video. This version is not going to be sponsored. Thank you all for letting me know in the comments about the context surrounding the business that I was working with. I will be returning the money. So they sent me products and I don't really know how to repackage them and send them back or if they'll take them. So I emailed the company immediately after seeing all of your comments, and I told them that I wanted them to send me a bill so that I could pay for the products that they sent me and that they do not need to pay me and that I was removing the video. So the version is gone and this is the re-upload. I apologize for working with them without doing more research beyond just working with somebody that a friend recommended. So I won't be working with them again. Thank you all for letting me know and for holding me accountable. I appreciate y'all. Hi, my name's Rachel and today we're doing another Authors Behaving Badly. Today's author is Ravi Zacharias. You're going to start noticing that I'm doing a new series of Authors Behaving Badly, which is going to be Fundy Authors Behaving Badly. And you're going to notice that in one way or another, I am connected to these people. Because Fundyland is way too small. I grew up in Assemblies of God churches. Some of you also did. Sorry about that. In an upcoming episode, we'll talk about AOG pastor Jimmy Swaggart, who my dad worked for, but that story is for a different day. Today's Authors Behaving Badly Fundy edition is Ravi Zacharias, who, just like Jimmy Swaggart and lots of other Fundy men who wrote books, was a mess, a disaster, a blight upon humanity. So today begins a new series of Authors Behaving Badly Fundy edition. Fundy stands for Fundamentalist Evangelical Christian. Technically, some of the first ABB videos that I did were on fundies because I've been talking about fundies on this channel anyway, but I figured I'd overtly say that if you are fundy out here doing stupid stuff, you're getting a video now. Yes, Kirk Cameron, you too. By the way, if you like my content, you can join my channel membership now, or my Patreon. Both are linked down below. As I said, today's fundy author is Ravi Zacharias. I'm going to go ahead and put trigger warnings on the screen though, and if you're not in a place where you can hear about any of this kind of stuff, please protect yourself, because the guy who did this stuff was absolutely horrendous and an abuser, and it's pretty bad. I have been hoping for a Fundy Fridays episode on this guy, but alas, they have not done it, and I need to rage about him. So here I am. Let's talk about Frederick Anthony Ravi Kumar Zacharias, who was born in India but was an American and Canadian Christian, an evangelical, a minister, an apologist who founded his own ministry called Ravi Zacharias International Ministries, RZIM. He did Christian apologetics for over 40 years. He authored more than 30 different books, and I actually have one of his books. I own this one, which went by a different name, but this is The Real Face of Atheism by Ravi Zacharias. This was on my stepdad's shelf. I stole it, and I won't be giving it back because nobody deserves to read this drivel. Not because he's Christian, but because the book is objectively terrible. Speaking of terrible, Ravi Zacharias is dead. That's not what's terrible. That's a good thing. The world is better for him being dead because this guy got away with multiple counts of sexual abuse. This was a huge scandal in the Fundy community. I have yet to ask my family about it. My family loved this guy, and like many Fundy pastors, Ravi Zacharias fell from grace, but only did so after his death. Until his death, he maintained his innocence and he was protected, unlike his victims. We will get there. Zacharias was born in India. His family was Anglican. He was skeptical of God and religion until the age of 17, when he says he tried to commit suicide by poison. He was in the hospital, and a Christian came to him in the hospital and gave him a Bible and told his mom to read to Ravi from John chapter 14, which contains Jesus's words to Thomas the Apostle. Zacharias said that John chapter 14 verse 19 is the one that touched him, which is a verse that says, because I will live, you will live, or because I live, you also will live. And he said to himself, this may be my only hope, a new way of living life as defined by the author of life itself. And so he became a born-again Christian, committing his life to Christ, as we say in the Fundy community. And he says that he prayed, Jesus, if you are the one who gives life as it is meant to be, I want it. Please get me out of this hospital bed. Well, and I promise I will leave no stone unturned in my pursuit of truth. I'm sure that that's a totally real story that definitely happened. I'm sure I believe that. As I said, he was born in and grew up in India. In 1966, he immigrated to Canada. He got his undergrad degree from the University, from the Ontario Bible College in 1972, which is now Tyndale University. Tyndale, like the publisher, the ones who published Jess Corbon's book at Tyndale. It's great. As I said, all All of Fundyland is interconnected. Nowhere is safe. It's like a spider web. In 1971, he goes to South Vietnam where he evangelized to U.S. soldiers and the Viet Cong. He was a professor of evangelism at Alliance Theological Seminary. In 1983, he spoke in Amsterdam at Billy Graham's Evangelistic Association's first international conference for itinerant, oh my god, I hate this word, itinerant evangelists. And after Amsterdam, he returned to India where he was like, India needs Christian apologetics to lead people to Christ and to train more Christians to lead people to Christ. Evangelism. And so, in 1984, RZIM, Ravi Zacharias International Ministries, was born. He founded it in Toronto, in Canada. He said he was going to pursue his calling as a classical evangelist in the arena of the intellectually resistant. You call this intellectual, Ravi? I say to you, while you are in hell? Okay, Ravi. Okay. And then later, the headquarters moved to the United States in Atlanta, Georgia. So, in 1989, after the fall of the Berlin Wall, this is the second time today I've talked about Berlin, Zacharias spoke in Moscow with students at the Lenin Military Political Academy. And this was the first of him entering the political sphere, which he got very into. He also went to Colombia and spoke to members of the judiciary about the importance of morality, having a solid moral foundation. I wonder what that morality was based on. That was 1993. And then the following year, so when I was 2 years old, this came out. This originally was called A Shattered Visage, The Real Face of Atheism. Now it's just called The Real Face of Atheism. And this is a terrible book. Like, it is legitimately one of the worst books that I have ever read in my life. My stepdad seemed to think that it had like such important things to say. And I'm like, my guy, are you okay? Because this is one of the most bad faith arguments for atheism or against atheism I have ever heard. I am not like a there is no God, there can be no God, there's no evidence for God atheist. I am an agnostic atheist, but Ravi doesn't know that nuance. Ravi does not understand atheism. He just like makes up what he thinks atheism is and then writes a whole ass anti-intellectual book on it, which is really sad. Like, how are you gonna straw man an entire people group, ideology group? How are you gonna straw man it and then pretend to be like a scholar on it and write this whole book? What's wrong with you? Billy Graham, another guy who will be on Authors Behaving Badly Fundy Edition, who's the reason my sister is a Christian, he blurbed this. If you were looking for an answer to the greatest question of our time, here's a book that faces it head on. Ravi has intellectual integrity and spiritual perception. His illustrations bring profound concepts within reach and touch both heart and mind. Intellectual integrity in here from Ravi Zacharias? I don't think so. I'll talk about that more in a minute. The Mormon Church in 2004, the LDS Church, opened up its pulpit at the Salt Lake Tabernacle and allowed Zacharias to come in and preach for a series of messages. And he delivered a sermon called "Who is the Truth? Defending Jesus Christ as the Way, the Truth, and the Life" to 7,000 people, including Mormons and other like Protestant camps, trying to like open up a dialogue between the groups because Mormons and evangelical fundies don't have the exact same beliefs. They like overlap a lot, but there's a lot of differences. And in a lot of fundy circles, we're not taught what Mormons believe. We're just taught that's a cult. That's it. I know that a lot of you really want me to look into Mormonism. I will. I'm going to find a good book and look into it, but like clearly I'm doing a lot of shit, man. Damn. Some evangelicals said that because of like the issues that they take with Mormons, the LDS Church, a lot of evangelicals were like, Ravi, how did you not take this opportunity to shit on the Mormons and the deep and foundational differences between the traditional Protestant, traditional like evangelical teachings and the LDS Church? And he responded by saying, Christians should not immediately condemn the LDS Church, but graciously build one step at a time in communicating our faith with clarity and conviction. Slowly evangelize to them and brainwash them away from their belief. Thank you for saying the quiet part out loud, Robbie. That's great of you. And the speaking engagement was almost ruined because Greg Johnson, the event organizer, said that Zacharias had nothing to do with editing this book that he worked on called The Kingdom of the Cults and had only loaned his name to the latest edition. Johnson later said sorry for the comment, but like, honestly, Ravi does that. Like, Ravi did that. Ravi did put his name on things or say that he had qualifications, say that he went to certain schools that he didn't went to. So, like, Greg Johnson was kind of based, though. I'll talk more about the fact that Ravi Zacharias lied about being a doctor in a second. Ravi Zacharias was loved by the Christian evangelical community. He was adored. He was a god among them. He spoke at constant conferences, colleges. He was often a keynote lecturer, National Religious Broadcasters Conference, National Conference on Christian Apologetics. In October of 2007, on multiple nights, he addressed the students and faculty of Virginia Tech on the topic of evil and suffering in the wake of the Virginia Tech massacre. He represented the evangelical community on the National Day of Prayer in Washington, D.C., the annual prayer breakfast at the United Nations, the African Union Prayer Breakfast in Mozambique, was named honorary chairman of the 2008 National Day of Prayer Task Force. He also participated in the 2016 Together ecumenical meetings, which Pope Francis addressed, giving them all shoulder pat and being like, good job. Even Pope Francis, a Catholic, which fundies don't see Catholics as true Christians. Ravi was like, who else can I put under my umbrella and try to indoctrinate into evangelicalism? Like, anyway. And also, are you betting you can guess what Ravi Zacharias' political affiliations were and like what his takes were on queerness and reproductive rights? I bet you can guess. I bet you can. In 2009, he signed the Manhattan Declaration, which affirmed the sanctity of human life and also said that the dignity of marriage was a union between a man and a woman. Also stated that freedom of religion was a foundational principle of justice and common good, which, like, the last part, I agree that freedom of religion should be a thing. That is like a justice issue, that is a common good, but like freedom from religion applies there too. Like, I would like to be free from Ravi Zacharias' religion. Thank you so much. And in 2016, Marco Rubio, a then presidential candidate who is, you guessed it, a Republican, appointed Zacharias to his anti-abortion Dignity of Life Advisory Panel. Fun stuff. Ravi Zacharias and his wife were rolling in dough. They made quite a bit of money. He was not a millionaire, but he was halfway there. His beliefs were that a coherent worldview must be able to answer 4 questions. So any worldview you have, like any like theological worldview you have, must be able to answer the questions of the origin of life, the meaning of life, morality, and destiny. And he was like, every religion makes claims about truth, but the Christian faith is unique in its ability to answer all of these questions. And it's like, is it? And he was like, Christianity is the only coherent worldview. Atheism is not coherent. And when you ask him why, he's like, because certain atheists did bad things. I don't know. I don't know. Christians really see this guy as like highbrow, like super intellectual, very smart. And I just listen to him talk and I'm like, everything you're saying sounds ridiculous. He believed that apologetics, Christian apologetics, was super important, and that it's like apologetics, if you ask me for a definition, this is not the definition. It's a one-sided debate that is meant to indoctrinate you. Like answering all the questions that you didn't ask in order to indoctrinate you into Christianity. And Zacharias believed that a Christian apologist had to argue 3 things: logic to make it tenable, feelings to make it livable, and whether or not one has the right to use it to make moral judgments. And he would argue apologetics by saying that the answer to the great existential questions is God, and defending the existence of God. And again, I just want to point out to you that his book is so incredibly bad. First of all, he doesn't know anything about abortion, so him being on abortion task forces is ridiculous. Like in one point, it says these intellectuals have wanted every curtain and veil removed, right down to tinkering with unborn fetuses. Tinkering with unborn fetuses? So in the womb? What are you talking about? Like what you're saying is not rooted in reality. And he, like, I simply went through this and I was reading it and I have like questions that he doesn't answer. So he says, the philosopher G.K. Chesterton said that to believe in the non-existence of God would be analogous to waking up some morning, looking in the mirror and seeing nothing. With no reflection, no perception, no idea whatsoever of self, there would be nothing to conform to, nothing to modify. Thus, the Socratic maxim, know yourself, would be rendered impossible. And my question was, why does the Christian God have the monopoly here, though? Like, how is it that the Christian God makes it so that you feel that you know yourself? Because I engaged in Christianity, engaged in in Christianity is a weird way to put it. And I did not feel as if I knew myself. But his answer would probably be like, you did it wrong. Then he makes these really bad faith arguments. In Nietzschean terms, atheism and the cause atheism and the result violence and hedonism are as logically connected as the chronological connection between Hitler's announcement of his intent in Mein Kampf and the hell ushered in by the Third Reich. And I said, that feels like a jump, pal. He has like questions for study and discussion, and it says, discuss the impact of Galileo, Darwin, and Freud upon the church. In what ways do they continue to influence disbelief today? In my experience as a now agnostic, none. It was not Galileo or Darwin or Freud that caused me to lose my faith. It was faith that caused me to lose my faith. He also says whether or not a philosopher can be legitimately blamed for the atrocious act of Hitler, because he's saying that Nietzsche is responsible for Hitler. So he's saying that philosophers who were atheists are responsible for the atrocities committed by certain authoritarian dictators who killed a lot of people. That is why he's saying that atheism bad because Hitler. That's this book. That's intellectual. Is Billy Graham okay? Billy Graham's also dead, and also was anti-Semitic and a piece of shit. Fuck Billy Graham and fuck Ravi Zacharias. That's just some of the stuff that I highlighted. That book was legitimately awful. Like, I cannot believe that people think that that's, wow, so smart, as my grandma would say. Well, it makes sense because Ravi Zacharias' credentials came into question. There was this guy who ran this website called Ravi Watch who talked about this at length. There was also another website called lyingforjesus.org that talked about Ravi Zacharias. Steve Bowman's website, Ravi Watch, is no longer available, unfortunately. But Steve Bowman is the guy who called out Ravi Zacharias for his fake, basically calling himself a doctor when he's not a doctor.
And so I was going about my business and trying to keep in touch with who the best Christian apologists were. And I found this guy on YouTube named Ravi Zacharias, and I was just quite smitten with him. I was back then still a confirmed atheist, as I am now. But there was a very brief period of time after hearing Ravi make an argument about the book of Daniel, 6th century BC, predicting Alexander the Great 200 years later, and it was powerfully done. And I thought, this guy has Oxford and Cambridge credentials, he has multiple doctorates, he knows what he's talking about. I have to give him prima facie credit for this argument, which means my atheist worldview can't accommodate fulfilled prophecy, so I have to get back to the drawing board. So I was very invigorated by what I saw at my first encounter with Ravi. And then I looked into it, and it was all hogwash. I mean, he had misled the audience about the dating of Daniel, not so much that I know when Daniel was dated, because nobody knows when Daniel was dated. It's an extraordinarily complex and controversial issue. But Ravi didn't disclose to his student audience that the main premise upon which his argument was based, that this is fulfilled prophecy, therefore it is evidence for God, that premise was extremely controversial, and that's putting it charitably. And I just thought, well, why would a guy who comes from an academic culture in fine places like Oxford and Cambridge mislead an audience like that? And I began looking into it and found that, well, he doesn't have Oxford and Cambridge credentials, and he doesn't have any academic doctorates. And that was very, very concerning to me. That was really eye-opening, that this guy's gotten away with this. He's claiming to be an Oxford professor while he's going to Oxford and has employees who have doctorates from Oxford. How's he getting away with this?
So on the back of his book, like the old version, it said Ravi Zacharias holds 3 doctoral degrees, and in reality he held no doctoral degree. He referred to himself as Dr. Zacharias. He spoke at venues where he was referred to as Dr. Zacharias, and so you think that in order to become a doctor you have to hold you have to complete a course of doctoral studies. He did not do this. Penguin Books published books saying that this man was a doctor and it never said an honorary doctoral degree, it said doctoral degrees. So then Ravi Watch, Steve Bowman, puts all this out there and says this man is not a doctor, and Ravi Zacharias added the word honorary to 2 of his websites in Europe, but the main website and the Canadian website RZIM, he left that word out but reduced the references to the times he referred to himself as Dr. Zacharias from 7 instances instances to 3 instances. He had a lot of like fake claims about his educational background. So he stated in his autobiography, God in the Shadows, that in 1905, in 1990, he spent some time at Cambridge University where he had been invited to be a visiting scholar. And he used this as like the greatest thing on his academic like resume, right? He told everybody this like it was a well-known fact, except it wasn't a fact, it was completely false. What actually happened is that in 1990 he did a 2 to 3 month sabbatical at a place called Ridley Hall in the town of Cambridge, England. As it turns out, Ridley has ties to Cambridge University, but it's not part of the university. It's a private religious training school. While attending Ridley, Zacharias goes to some classes at Cambridge University, and based on this, he has told everybody that he's a visiting scholar at Cambridge University. Okay. Even I, with my little knowledge of higher education, knows that that's fucking ridiculous. So then RaviWatch.com gets a Freedom of Information Act request from Cambridge University. They confirm that Zacharias did a sabbatical at Ridley, attending lectures and classes at the University of Cambridge whilst on sabbatical at Ridley Hall would not confer University of Cambridge visiting scholar status on a student. Ridley Hall is not a constituent part of the University of Cambridge and has different criteria for granting visitor scholar status.
When I began emailing and found that he would never been a visiting scholar at Cambridge, and I had an email from Cambridge saying as much, and I shared it with his ministry, I honestly expected them to say, we are so sorry, we must stop making these claims on behalf of Mr. Zacharias, and they would clean up their act, and that would be the end of it for me. And I look back on, oh my God, was I naive, right? I mean, but I thought this. I'd grown up with missionaries who were people of integrity, and I thought, okay, you call a Christian evangelical organization on its public deceptions, and at least someone within the organization is going to say, Ravi, you can't keep doing this. And they didn't do that. They lied to cover up the lies, and there was a whole strategy that RZIM employed. I won't bore you with all the details, but it was clear that the PR people had put Ravi's reputation well above truth. And that response really shocked me, and that was when I began thinking, there's more dirt here. And pretty soon I found that, well, he never had a professorship at Oxford. I mean, he claims to be an official lecturer at Oxford in his autobiography. He told fans and donors, I'm now a professor at Oxford. Not true. And it was almost like every rabbit hole I went down on Ravi turned up dirt.
So Steve Bowman of RaviWatch.com contacts Zacharias and informs him, I'm going to make this information public. And Ravi Zacharias responded by taking out the Cambridge University part from his bio and replacing it with the accurate thing, which is Ridley Hall in Cambridge. Publicly, Ravi Zacharias said multiple times that he travels 3 times a year to lecture at and lectures regularly at Oxford University and is a senior research fellow there. He has even said that he's an actual professor at Oxford University. And that's false. That's fake. So the heroes over at Ravi Watch, which they really are heroes, and I'll get to why in a couple minutes. They contacted Oxford University only to learn that Zacharias was never an employee there. It was just a flat out lie. His senior research fellow position was actually at Wycliffe Hall, which was another religious training institute, and their stated goal is to train evangelists and help people find a new love for Jesus. Wycliffe Hall is not one of Oxford's colleges. It's not at all a part of Oxford University. And come to find out, he didn't even have a formal teaching position at Wycliffe Hall either, and that his research fellow position was honorary. And of course, what happens? Ravi Watch, the website, says, hey, you're lying again. And Zacharias finally decides to disclose this to the public by changing it to senior research fellow honorary at Wycliffe Hall. Boy's a liar. He He also said things like he had been conferred 10 honorary doctorates. My guy, just say you don't have a PhD and go. He said that in his home country, India, honorific titles are customary and are used frequently out of respect for elders. RZIM puts out a statement that said, in earlier years, doctor did come before Ravi's name in some of our materials and on our website, which is an appropriate practice with honorary doctorates. However, because this practice can be contentious in certain circles, we no longer use it. Contentious? It's lying. Unfortunately, it just gets worse from here, so trigger warning for sexual assault. Before and after his death in 2020, Ravi Zacharias, this is where we get into the sexual assault part. Ravi Zacharias was accused of sexual misconduct and sexual abuse. In April of 2017, Lori Ann Thompson and her husband Brad Thompson sent a demand letter to Ravi Zacharias demanding that he pay $5 million to them in exchange for them refraining from filing a lawsuit against him that would have accused him of impropriety. They had evidence of text exchanges, which included nude photos of Lori Ann Thompson sent to Ravi Zacharias. And in response, Ravi Zacharias followed a lawsuit accusing the couple of extortion. I'm going to read for you part of what happened, and if you'd like to skip this part of the video, you can do so by going to the timestamp that is currently on the screen, and then it will be over and I'll continue talking about this without getting into explicit details. But basically, there was a couple who was friends of Lori Ann Thompson, and Thompson confided in the Basils, the couple, about her relationship, which I hesitate to call it that, with Zacharias. And it said during their time together, this is from the Julie Royce report, by the way, which I will leave linked down below if you want to read the whole thing. It says during their time together, the Basils said that they became convinced that Zacharias had groomed Thompson so he could exploit her sexually. By the way, Zacharias was 30 years older than Lori. The Basils said Thompson, who was 30 years younger than Zacharias, was abused by her father and longed for a nurturing father figure. In many ways, she was kind of like a child in regard to him because of his age. It just followed a pattern that we are familiar with in regards to abuse. It was just this slowly drawing Lori into something deeper, Denise Basil said. It seemed more innocent at the beginning, but it kept increasing. On October 29th, 2016, while Thompson was with the Basils, Thompson sent an email to Zacharias, which the Basils released to the Royce report this week. This article is from the September 2020 is kind of when all of this came to a head, which I will get into later. It says that Thompson writes, she can no longer continue with what I know to be a sin against God and each of our spouses. Thompson announced that she was planning on telling her husband about her illicit affair with Zacharias that evening. I have no control over how Brad will respond to or handle the information, but I can no longer hold this secret, and it's soul-searing shame. Thompson added, if one of my daughters was approached by a man 30 years her senior in a position of power and trust, and this type of thing had occurred, I would be furious with him. I suspect so would you if it were one of your precious girls. Yes, Ravi Zacharias does indeed have children, including daughters. You, sir, are that man, Lori says. You took advantage of a devastated daughter and left her devoured once again. I am so appalled that I allowed myself to enter into this level of deception. You took and I gave a part of my soul and later my body that was not yours. The investment in this relationship, from taking my email to taking off my clothes, makes me weep with despair, feeling desolate, devastated, and disgusted. Thomas's letter includes that request that Zacharias not reply, as I simply cannot hear from you or see you ever again. And yet Zacharias responded 3.5 hours later saying, are you going to tell him it's me? 48 seconds later, Ravi sends another email to her saying, you promised you wouldn't, Lori Ann. If you betray me here, I will have no option but to bid this world goodbye, I promise. He writes again saying, can we not at least meet once before you do this, please? And he further says, little did I know that was the most dark and accursed day of my life. You will not hear from me again. 18 minutes later, the Basils sent an email to Ravi Zacharias from Thompson's account saying, we are Lori Ann's counselors and she is currently receiving intensive counseling with us to find healing and restoration for her marriage. Healing and restoration. I don't mean to be rude, but like that's fundy speak. So if you ever hear those words, it's funny talk. It is not her intent to share what has happened to anyone except her husband, which is necessary for any hope of marital restoration, and we are bound by confidentiality. We need some assurance from you that you will not harm yourself, otherwise we will find it necessary to contact 911 in your location. We await your prompt response. Thank you. Zacharias respond by saying, I'm fine, thank you. I'm just concerned about her. Thank you, please tell her I am praying for her. She is very much in my prayers. This is so disgustingly insidious. The way this man went from, Lori Ann, you can't do this to me, I'll kill myself, to, oh, she's in my prayers, I'm so concerned about her. Predator. He was always a predator. He was always a predator.
I'm going to share some of Lorianne's video statement. If you cannot or do not want to watch it, that's completely understandable. I just figured that this is her like victim impact statement, and I think that I would rather her tell it in her own words. So I'm going to play it, but this timestamp is when it is over. So if you don't want to hear it, it's completely understandable.
I can't imagine anything that I would like to talk about less, but that I would need to talk about more. I was born into the home of a serial sexual predator. Abuse has been my birthright. It shouldn't be anybody's birthright. Adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, have been robustly studied and scaled in severity. Individuals can have an ACE score of 1 to 10, and mine is a perfect 10. Outcomes in adulthood for children like me are abysmal. Lacking the average expected environment, my personhood and personality were formed not only in a lack, but in deprivation of all that would fashion growth. But grow I did. I was clever, quiet, and compulsively compliant, all things that helped me to survive. Deep rivers of ruin ran under my intelligence, undermining my every effort to overcome. I tried hard to run away from the ravages, but they ran through me. I would be preyed upon by men in positions of power over the next 25 years. Early and well-developed patterns of compliance were complicated by the very real human need to belong. Predators possess. The abused very often do not know the difference between the two. I survived a series of possessions as a student, as an employee, as a patient, and as a parishioner. I wish this had have been different for me and for many. I wanted each of these individuals to be trustworthy and true, and they weren't. I met Ravi Zacharias in June 2014 at a UCB Canada Businessman Luncheon in Kingston, Ontario, when my husband Brad, a businessman and avid listener of RZ's work and a regular annual donor to UCB Canada, sponsored and hosted a table. It is my belief that RZ targeted me from the moment that he saw me. He had his assistant take my email at that event, and an online, seemingly innocent dialogue ensued for an extended period of time. Many survivors of childhood sexual abuse have a profound spiritual wound and questions about God. Myself notwithstanding, RZ appeared to me to be one of the safest, most well-respected, and honorable persons in whom to confide and seek wise counsel. His position as a global representative of the gospel was one of extraordinary and unquestioned trust. I simply had no reason to suspect that he had any nefarious intentions. I think this position of naive trust is equally understandable and relatable. It's been well over 6 years since that day. I wish I had never had the misfortune of meeting RZ in person. In hindsight, attending that luncheon was one of the worst days of my life, and as you can well imagine, I have had a few. The details of the grooming process and subsequent online sexual abuse has been released in the Roy's report in a narrative that I wrote in late 2016, early 2017. To revisit and retell of that traumatic time wounds, I feel all the same nausea as the world spins in savage slow motion. I wrote them then, and they still stand now. There is no need to repeat myself, nor do I wish to. I tried to tell a Christian counselor what was happening to me. He told me not to tell anyone, especially my husband, that he could see RZ's draw to me, and that if anyone ever found out, the kingdom of God would be irreparably damaged. I became suicidal. It was not just what was happening to me, but whom it was happening by. Even after the abuse stopped, I stayed in touch with RZ. He was the only person that knew what had happened to me. In time, I told my sister, but I was never ever going to tell anyone else. I traveled to a counseling intensive with Jerry and Denise Basil. They were recommended to me by friends in the ministry. I had no intention of telling them exactly what happened or whom it happened with. When I finally disclosed to them, together we drafted an email to cut off contact with RZ and to tell my husband about the abuse. I was contacted by text, email, and phone by RZ. Once I had sent a final email to him, he threatened to commit suicide if I broke my silence. I was terrified in that moment and for a long time to come. To my betrayer, telling anyone was a betrayal. Abusers not only demand silence, they enforce it. When I disclosed the same day to my husband what happened to me, he was devastated. He was crumbling at home with our children, and I was in another country in complete collapse. He wasn't sure he wanted me to come home, and I wasn't sure I would come home. No one slept that Saturday night or for many years of Saturday nights to come. Life as we knew it was ripped apart. We were torn asunder. I took a leave of absence from my much-loved work as I and we could hardly function. A handful of friends knew. We contacted an advocate who put us in contact with a trauma-informed therapist. Daily, I was not sure if my husband was going to come home. Daily, he was not certain if I would be alive when he got home. The lack of any cognitive framework of clergy sexual abuse mixed with deep attachment wounds of his own left my husband drowning in shame and excruciating pain. We started looking at our options for accountability. What were we going to do? We could go to the media, survivor bloggers, the board, which included some of RZ's family, hire a lawyer to confront him privately, or do absolutely nothing. Given the expansive power differential and our desire for privacy, we chose to confront RZ with a lawyer. It was not then, and it is not now, about the money. It was about accountability. We held the view that powerful people who target, groom, and exploit others should be held accountable. We and our legal team underestimated the level of retaliation and backlash we would receive. RZ kept asking for more time to respond to our demand letter, and this time was granted. The day after the final extension expired, RZ filed a federal lawsuit against us, alleging that he was a victim of an elaborate extortion scheme for money that we didn't need. We were also accused of racketeering, which is still a concept I do not fully understand. We were dumbfounded. I remember when we were served with the lawsuit, I was absolutely terrified. I was certain that RZ had sent someone to kill us both. RZ used a former local church abuse experience where my husband and I had been victim of financially and spiritually abusive cleric to support his fantastical claim that we were a litigious couple who sued people for financial gain. While this narrative is as verifiably false as it is reprehensible, it was also widely parroted and propagated by RZIM. RZ as an individual and RZIM as an institution took a prior abuse situation that fractured my husband and I years ago and used it information to publicly and falsely crucify us. The consequences of trying to hold RZ to account for his abusive and predatory behavior was that my husband and I not only endured endless interpersonal atrocities, we were also publicly and widely humiliated and vilified. When RZ sued us as victims, as alleged extortionists, my husband and I were still staggering under the weight of trauma and struggling with extensive PTSD symptoms. We were horrified and outraged and had some financial resources to use. We also had limited personal resources with which to fight an individual with as much power and virtually limitless resources. RZ reported that he had a donor who was willing to fund the full cost of litigation and that this process could take several more years. To settle with RZ out of court seemed like the only viable and indeed the only practical option. Both parties signed a non-disclosure agreement, and we had no idea that he would break it almost immediately. Even when he broke it so flagrantly, we were still unable to collect ourselves enough to even think about the protracted litigation process that we were promised. Being abused costs far more than can ever be properly recompensed. It has been reported elsewhere that I had received a financial settlement from RZ. More than half of that money reportedly received was spent on legal fees. Approximately another $33,000 was spent on therapy, which is ongoing, and a further $30,000 was invested in a Master's of Child Advocacy and Policy from Montclair State University. I have also lost my annual income as a healthcare professional, yet astonishingly, there remains those who still accuse me of being in this for the money. This false narrative was started by RZ, but it has been widely and circulated publicly and privately by RZIM and RZIM supporters. After the press release issued in Christianity Today on December 3rd, 2017, it became untenable to remain in the same community. RZ portrayed my husband as a man who pimped his wife for a monetary gain. This was not only widely believed, it was also untenable and false. By March of 2018, we had decided to sell the home we built together at a loss and move to a smaller home at a higher cost in another city entirely. We left the work that I loved as a registered health professional, and I went to grad school to study abuse. The hope was that we could enjoy some semblance of local anonymity and daily safety and stability. I knew the world to be an unsafe place before I met Ravi Zacharias, but I yet had hope that there were some safe and sacred spaces. I no longer live with that hope. I trusted him. I trusted Christendom. That trust is irreparably and catastrophically shattered. I yet believe Christ, even if he's not true, as he is the highest ethic that I can find. They, the religious elite, stripped him, beat him mercilessly, called him all manner of names, and publicly crucified him too. Even though I was a survivor before I met RZ, having met and come to know him was one of the most traumatizing, soul-destroying, faith-crushing seasons of my life. He tore down everything that I had built, that I thought was beautiful. My marriage, my husband, my home, my faith, my family's faith, my capacity to mother, my mental and physical health, and what little good repute I had, and ultimately my entire career path. Most of what matters in life is held together by healthy relationships, secure attachments, and trust. The betrayal trauma that we incurred because of RZ and RZIM crushed crushed our relationship to each other, to God, and severed our connection with the wider faith community. My privacy has been expunged and replaced with secrecy. Never again will I be hired for work without someone reading about what happened to me at his hands on the internet. Never again will privacy be fully mine. I accept that as my new reality, but I will never come to agree with it. RZ's secrets, sins, and public shame do not belong to me, and I verbally and publicly send them back to him and RZIM. I have repeatedly requested to be released from a non-disclosure and non-disparagement agreement. To date, no release has come. So be it. My words belong to me, and I take them back today. To my fellow advocates, thank you for speaking for me, where and when I could not speak for myself. To my fellow survivors, hold fast. There is hope. There is also help. All will not always be lost. What happened to you does not have the last word. You do. It is my hope that this is my final statement on speaking on my own behalf, but I want you to know that I will never stop speaking for you on behalf of yours.
The case was settled in November 2017 with a non-disclosure agreement, and in December of 2017, Ravi issued a statement that said, "Let me state categorically that I never met Thompson alone, publicly or privately. The question is not whether I solicited or sent any illicit photos or messages to her. I did not, and there is no evidence to the contrary. But rather, whether I should have been a willing participant in any extended communication with a woman not my wife. The answer I can unequivocally say is no, and I fully accept responsibility." He said, "I've been faithful to my wife absolutely throughout my marriage," and that he said he failed to exercise caution and to protect himself from the appearance of impropriety. But Ravi is dead now. He died in 2020. He had cancer. He died, and I don't apologize for saying good riddance, because it was revealed that he is exactly who Lori said he was. So she broke the NDA to speak out again. Go Lori Ann, honestly. She issued a public statement in 2021. She first met Ravi Zacharias at a radio event in Canada, and she says, "It is my belief that Ravi Zacharias targeted me from the moment he saw me," noting that Ravi's assistant noted down her email address and that the pair began communication via email after that. She didn't want to repeat what happened, but said the grooming process and the subsequent online abuse. Ravi Zacharias chose to file a lawsuit for racketeering, which I think I speak for all of us when I say I still don't fucking understand racketeering at all. She says, "The day after the final extension expired, RZ filed a federal lawsuit against us alleging that he was a victim of an elaborate extortion scheme for money that we didn't need." One of the people that supported Ravi was a woman named Ruth Malhotra, who worked for Ravi, who worked for RZIM, and she claims that suspicions regarding his behavior had existed throughout his lifetime, but that RZIM employees were not allowed to investigate them. Ruth Malhotra is now on good terms with Lori Ann Thompson. They actually spent Christmas together one year, and Ruth wrote a Christianity Today article about it, saying, "As I wandered into the dining room and saw the picture-perfect place setting, tears filled my eyes. To be given a seat at the table, any table, is one of life's greatest gifts. To be given a place at this table, a miracle." The hostess was Lori Ann Thompson, a woman who was groomed and sexually abused in 2014 to 2016 by my then boss, Ravi Zacharias, who had been a world-renowned Christian apologist. The guest was yours truly. I had been the spokesperson for Thompson's abuser throughout the abuse crisis. Indeed, for years I was part of the machine that nearly crushed her and her family. It is hard to overstate how brutally the Thompson family had been treated by Zacharias and the ministry he led, or how far-reaching the consequences of this injustice inflicted upon them extended. When Lori Ann and her Thompson Brad confronted Zacharias in 2017 about his predatory behavior, Zacharias filed a RICO lawsuit against them and set out to destroy their reputation in the court of law and public opinion. Lori Ann's bravery paved the way for numerous other women to come forward in 2020, and an investigation confirmed in 2021 that Zacharias was a sexual predator who harmed many people. 4 months after Ravi Zacharias' death from cancer in 2020, 3 women who worked at 2 day spas that he co-owned in the Atlanta area came forward alleging that he had sexually harassed multiple massage therapists over the course of 5 years. By the way, the reason that the women of the day spas found out that he was a serial predator was because of Steve Bowman's website, RaviWatch.com. a hero. But it's also because of the bravery of Lorianne Thompson and her coming forward that Steve reported on that, and then Ravi's other victims were able to find out about it. It's interesting that an atheist like Steve Bowman is the reason why women were able to get their stories heard. You could almost say that that is the real face of atheism, Ravi. And according to Christianity Today, which talked about the investigation, Zacharias masturbated in front of one of the women more than 50 times, requested explicit photos of her, and asked for sex on at least 2 occasions. Other women claimed that Zacharias had inappropriately groped or fondled them. A former business partner, Anurag Sharma, expressed regret at not stopping Zacharias and issued an apology to one of the victims in the Christianity Today article. So Christianity Today ran a report about what these women were saying. Initially, RZIM denied these claims and then hired a law firm, Miller and Martin, to conduct an investigation into all of this. And Miller and Martin took on, they decided to hire a private investigation firm, which consisted of former federal law enforcement officers, and the investigators interviewed more than 50 people, including more than a dozen massage therapists who had worked for Ravi Zacharias, as well as accessed data from 4 mobile devices that were used by Ravi Zacharias. And on December 23rd of 2020, RZIM confirmed that the allegations were true, and they released a preliminary report from the investigation, which concluded the interim investigation update indicates this assessment of Ravi's behavior to be true, that he did indeed engage in sexual misconduct. This misconduct is deeply troubling and wholly inconsistent with the man Ravi Zacharias presented both publicly and privately to so many over more than 4 decades of public ministry. We are heartbroken at learning this, but feel it necessary to be transparent and to inform our staff, donors, and supporters at this time, even while the investigation continues. February 2021, RZIM released the full results of its investigation. It was found that Ravi Zacharias solicited and received sexually explicit photos from more than 200 women who were in their early 20s until a few months before his death in 2020. According to investigators, Zacharias also used thousands of dollars from ministry funds, which had been dedicated to a humanitarian effort, to pay for massage therapists, providing them housing, schooling, and monthly support for extended periods of time. I've been trying to be more open about this specifically because with everything that's happening in Florida with the book stuff, the word groomer gets thrown around a lot, which is really difficult for me to go to my school board and hear that because they don't want books banned, I'm a groomer. When in fact, I know very well how grooming works because it happened to me when I was 17. And this is what groomers do, is they find people in need of something and then they try to bridge that gap. And hearing that Ravi Zacharias did that is, I don't really have the words for that. But of course he offered them things that they were in need of while he was getting them to do things that were unspeakable. In an article on the report, the Gospel Coalition, who I can't stand, but thanks for writing this article, I guess, they said apparently Zacharias was setting the women at ease by asking questions about their background, including financial struggles or emotionally broken backgrounds. For example, one therapist noted that Zacharias spent the first half of their massage session asking about her spiritual journey and prior abuse. This set her at ease and made her feel that he cared for her as a person before he later asked her to massage his genitals. Another woman that he would talk about reported that he would talk about her career plans and efforts to improve her financial situation while he was massaging her breasts. She never came forward because she thought, who would believe me, against a famous Christian leader. Some therapists also reported that Zacharias paid well or would leave large tips and gave gifts that were at times lavish, sometimes a Persian rug or a Louis Vuitton wallet with $500 inside. Sorry, I really did not think that this was going to be bringing up past trauma for me. RZIM would pay for Ravi Zacharias to stay at his apartment in Bangkok, and he would travel alone to Bangkok and other parts of Southeast Asia for long periods of time, and he owned 2 apartments in Bangkok. Between 2010 and 2014, he spent 256 days in one of these apartments. RZIM reimbursed the rent for this, meaning that people were paying for him to go to Bangkok, stay in his apartment. The one of the apartments in the same building, it was in the same building but on a different floor, was where he housed one of his massage therapists. Christianity Today reported on this, saying that one woman told investigators that after he arranged for the ministry RZIM to provide her with financial support, he required sex from her. She called it rape because it was. She said Zacharias made her pray with him to thank God for the opportunity they both received, and as other victims called her his reward for living a life in service to God. Zacharias warned the woman, who was a Christian, that if she ever spoke out against him, she would be responsible for the millions of souls lost when his reputation was damaged. Vicky Blue, one of his victims, said that Zacharias threatened to make her and her daughter Becca, who was also abused, miserable if she disclosed the abuse. She said that Ravi kept talking about an anonymous donor that he could get limitless money from, which is the same thing that he said to Lorianne about the lawsuit. He said, I can keep it going and make your life miserable until you die. Vicky Blue said that Zacharias helped her over spiritual confusion and that she thought he was the closest person to God other than Jesus. Later, he told her that his marriage was unsatisfactory and that Vicky Blue was his soulmate and that he couldn't survive without her. She said that I don't even want to say what he did to her. He sexually assaulted her, and she believed at the time that he was in love with her. She said that she was confused and that she was vulnerable. She said, it's hard to explain when someone gives you spiritual advice and you know everything he says about God is true, yet he's doing these things to you. It took years of therapy to realize I didn't do anything wrong. Blue was persuaded to open a spa with Zacharias as a co-owner, and it failed financially. Blue maintains her daughter Becca said Zacharias molested her and 6 other spa therapists, and also complained he had done something perverted or molested them. Vicky said, I realized then how much I had been used and manipulated. And despite being on all of those, panels for being anti-abortion and saying nonsense about abortion in his terribly written book, in an interview with a retired Ontario provincial police officer named Shirley Stewart, she recounted that Ravi Zacharias, who at the time was a Christian minister already, pressured her to have an abortion after she became pregnant as a teenager by his brother Ramesh. She told this story finally after Ravi was already dead. I will link the story down below, but she was a 17-year-old girl and he was an adult and he should have known better. He did know better. He was guilt tripping, saying this is going to kill our parents, this pregnancy, you will lose your career as a doctor, because that's what Ramesh was going to university for. He suggested praying, but then he said it would be best if they terminated the pregnancy. She says that she wrote Ravi Zacharias a letter later on. He responded and he said, Dear Shirley, I received your letter last week, and since I'm about to embark on an extended set of meetings for nearly 2 months away from home, I felt I should reply before leaving so that I could at least acknowledge the receipt of your letter. Certainly this is the first time in 26 years since the incident that anyone has spoken to me about it. Some of the things you've mentioned are absolutely brand new to me. As you well know, we have had repeated contacts with your brother and Mike, and never once has anything like this been mentioned. In fact, he has been very warm and helpful to Margie and me. Margie is Ravi Zacharias' wife. And whenever we have needed help, the one time your parents met me, their clear displeasure was with Ramesh and never hinted that I had anything to do with this tragedy. They too have always been very kind to me, so your letter, Shirley, came as a complete surprise. I never once to you or Ramesh suggested what you are implying in your letter. More than half a lifetime after the fact, it's hard to even remember the details, but I well remember the exact route I took. As you well know, Shirley, those were the last days of my mother, who was going to die so prematurely. I was carrying the brunt of that situation, having been so close to her. When Ramesh told me of the possibility of what you and he were facing, naturally I was shocked and disappointed. Doubly so, Shirley, because you may not realize, but months before I had warned him. I pray from the depths of my heart, Shirley, for the healing and restoration in both Ramesh's and your heart. I have no doubt the anguish has been deep. The God of mercy and grace will graciously forgive the mistakes of youth for the pain you felt. I am truly sorry. So many years have gone by for all of us since we first came to know Christ. Over the years and facing countless experiences, we have all faced many tragedies. I have learned one can either be hardened or softened, and always prayed for the latter to the God of all grace. Thank you for your candor and willingness to talk about how painful it was. I admire your sensitivity. Sincerely, Ravi. And when asked about this response, what her feelings were, Shirley said, I just feel like that was the twisting of the knife, that he would lie about this, his involvement, and his advice to us. I find that letter so insidious. It also, it plays into exactly what I don't doubt that many people have abortions that they regret. I know friends of mine who are Christians who have sex and they get pregnant and they are pressured by their boyfriend to have abortions, and then they go on to regret them. I think that that's a huge problem in the Christian community, and what I hate is that the same Christians who do that then go on to be like, see, this is the trouble with abortion, is abortion regret. And I'm like, the people who caused the abortion regret was you. That was you. You did that. This is a self-fulfilling fulfilling prophecy. Like, you have created the problem and then said that abortion was the problem. The problem was always you. My mom does that. She says, you know, I have friends who we still cry 30 years later over their abortions. And I'm like, and I have friends who say that they do it all over again. So anyway, fuck Ravi Zacharias for that. I hope Shirley's okay. RZIM posted a statement apologizing to his victims. Words cannot come close to expressing the sorrow we feel for what you've been through or the gratitude we feel for the bravery with which you have responded. Carson Whitenauer, who was a RZIM employee, called Zacharias one of his generation's greatest frauds, a sexual predator, and a uniquely charismatic manipulator. Just reading that note from Shirley, I feel that way too. And honestly, having read Ravi Zacharias' book, I feel that it was even written in a manipulative way because it uses logical fallacies, calling himself a doctor in order to make you think like this is so smart and so highbrow, written by a doctor, and all it is some sexual predator who wanted to shit on atheists, strawmanning atheists. That's it. That's the book. In 2021, the UK branch of RZIM, Zacharias Trust, changed its name and cut ties with RZIM and criticized their response as inadequate, which I agree to. In the same month of the same year, RZIM Africa suspended its operations. In March of the same year, RZIM said it would alter its name and remove all materials related to Ravi Zacharias. They had a falling of donations, obviously, so they cut 60% of their workforce worldwide. As I said, this was a worldwide ministry. This man had hands everywhere. And instead of running programs to teach and send out evangelists and apologists, we're just supporting evangelism by like making donations and grants. And they said that they were trying to help use funds to prevent and care for victims of sexual abuse. RCIM in Canada suspended operations or winded down their operations. I think it's suspended now. His ordination was revoked, which the damage is done. The dude's dead. Like, this is all nonsense. You guys should have showed up when Lorianne Thompson said something. Sorry, I'm really trying to hold it together. You guys should have put your money where your mouth was when Lorianne Thompson came forward. HarperCollins, their Christian publishing subsect, confirmed that they would no longer sell books by Ravi Zacharias and that it was working with Lee Strobel, who's another Christian author, to remove Ravi Zacharias from certain other works. In August of 2021, the Brad Son law firm filed a lawsuit on behalf of several former RZIM big donors, including NFL folks, player Derek Carrier and his wife Dora. They wanted to have their donations returned to them. Raven, are you kidding me? They had donated for 17 years. They wanted their donations back. As in the lawsuit, they were the plaintiffs, and they said, we gave money to RZIM believing that it was to finance spreading Christianity, evangelism, but it actually financed him having fucking apartments in Bangkok where he housed his victims. Ravi Zacharias has several kids, and his daughter came forward giving an apology, which too little too late. And then she went on to, since RZIM basically like scaled back, she went on to create a new ministry which was talking about how cancel culture is anti-Christian. And I'm like, shut the fuck up. You don't get to talk about cancel culture ever, but you especially, as a person who did not stand up for Lorianne Thompson, never get to talk about cancel culture. Shut all the way up. Anyway, that ministry canceled itself. It shut down after less than a year. So maybe karma is real. I don't know. I'm agnostic. Raven! So that's the story of Ravi Zacharias, sexual predator, alleged Christian, piece of garbage, author, fake doctor, and resident of hell. So good for you, buddy. Hope it's toasty down there. Thanks so much for watching. Leave your comments and questions down below. I'll try to leave some further reading in the description if you'd like. Let me know what terrible fundy author I should take on next. I have a list. I'm thinking Billy Graham, but if there's somebody else you'd like me to see, like Allie Beth Stuckey, who has me blocked on Twitter for I don't know what fucking reason, I would love to hear what fundies you would like me to come for next. I don't care about their feelings. Y'all think I'm mean to like these regular ass authors. I have not been mean once. I am so mean to fundies doing terrible shit. Like this is the most condensed I will get of meanness. So mean. Prepare for meanness. Let me know who you want me to do next. Alright, thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye.
Hi, it's Trash Can Rachel, and I'm here to say
Thank you for being a friend to my Therapy Pills patrons, and those are Alexander, Allie Magpie, Amanda M, Ashley B, Bubble Tea, Cami, Chris, Claire, Des Roberts, DJ Grimmer, Emperor's New Blues, Eric D, Harley, Jack and Jill, John E, Casey M, Kate W, Kelly K, Quinn, okay buddy, Lady Kittybug, Lex, Lula, Molly, Alice, Peggy, Witch Bitch, Rain, Samar, Scarlett, Shiny, SMK, and Zachary. Thank you all so much for being a friend.
And before I go, I have to say thank you for being a friend to my Potato Search Marxist patrons. And those are AM Angel, Aiden, Alicia, Amanda B, Andy, Angelica, Anita, Artie the Ninth, Ashley H, Aubrey P, Ava, BB, Beck, Blythe, Bookish Barbie, Ray, Bree, Brenda, Bryn, Caitlin, Carlin, Catherine, Kathy, Chris, CJ, Colleen, Courtney, Corwin, Corey, Darren, Deborah, Diet Goth, Dorian, Dorothea, Ebby, Eden, Elise, Ember, Emily A, Emily L, Grace, Gracie, Hannah C, Hannah T, Harpy Kuro, Hello There Darling, Ilyanaka, India Inks, JM Tennant, Jackal All Trades, Jay's on Olympus, JT, Jen with 2 N's, Jennifer T, Jenny G, Jillian, Jules, Kaylee, Kat, Katya, Kiala, I believe is the name on here, but if that's wrong, can you let me know? Hi, welcome, I see you're new here. Kendra, Kylie, Laughing Cat Dog, Laura, Lauren B, Library of Scars, Lisa B, Liz Cardigan, Luna Moth, Lustful Octopus, Martin, Maddie, Marquita, Maz, Malara, Meow Meow, James, Nat, Natalie, Never, Nicole G, Nicole R, Nicole T, Nikki, 9 Binary, Paige E, Paige P, Foxglove, Pixel Stars, Pia Raytheon, Quill, Rachel B, Raquel, Rat Sarah, Reba, Rebecca, Ren, Robin, Rowan, Other Rowan, Sequoia, Samantha, Sarah H, Sarah K, Sarah the Bear, Scarlett, Shanae, Shannon, Shayna, Sheena K, Sean, Sierra, Stephanie, Talia, 3 Old Dogs, Toast, Trashcan Teddy. I just realized that maybe they put their name as Trashcan Teddy because I say I'm Trashcan Rachel. Anywho, Sev, Valentine, Writer A, thank you all so much for being a friend.